Hello, I'm here with, of course, the first rule of punk. And last time we read, Malu's mom was loving the dance class, and Malu not so much. They were inquiring about a little more information, and Malu says to her mom, "Mom, I'm not doing a whole session," I whispered urgently. "Don't worry," Mom said. "I'm not going to force you to do it. I'm glad you at least tried." "Good," I said, feeling like I was finally able to breathe. "I'm going to get my shoes." I couldn't wait to get out of there and meet the band for practice. I walked back to the cubbies and sat down on a chair next to the office to put my sneakers back on as quickly as possible. If I didn't hurry, Mom might change her mind about signing me up for the classes. From where I sat, I could hear Selena and her mom talking inside the office. "What is this? Is it like the river dance?" Senora Ramirez asked. "It's Irish dancing, Mom," Selena said. "But you're not Irish. Why do you want to do Irish dancing?" "It looks kind of cool," Selena said. "It's kind of like Irish huapango." Senora Ramirez laughed. "That's the silliest thing I've heard. You don't have time for that, Selena." "I promise it won't get in the way of my dancing here," Selena pleaded. "I've already said no," Senora Ramirez said, sounding agitated. "Besides, you know this time of year is busy with Independence Day, El Dia de los Muertos, Las Posadas. We have too many obligations already." "But, Mommy—" "No, now come on," Senora Ramirez said, cutting her off. "They're waiting for us." "Yes, Mommy," Selena said. I leaned low over my knee, pretending not to notice as they came out of the office. Selena balled up a piece of paper and threw it into the trash on the way to meet Mom. When Senora Ramirez started going over the brochure with Mom, I stuck my hand into the trash can and pulled out the paper Selena had thrown away. Once I smoothed it out, I could see it was a flyer for an Irish dance class at a neighborhood rec center. I quickly stuffed the paper into my pocket before joining Mom, who was at the door saying goodbye to Senora Ramirez. "Are you sure that's your mom?" Selena asked, checking that the moms were out of earshot. "She can move, but you looked like a rag doll." She let out her Wicked Witch cackle. I'd actually started to feel a little bad for Selena after hearing Senora Ramirez shoot her down about the Irish dance lessons, but she made it really hard to sympathize with her. "You're right," I said. "I could use a little spring in my step. Maybe a little Irish spring." And fourth graders, Irish Spring is a type of soap, by the way. Selena looked at me like she was trying to see inside my head. "Let's go," Mom called from the doorway. "See you at school," I said, and gave Selena a smirk. At first, I felt pretty good about not letting Selena get the best of me, even though my Irish Spring joke was kind of corny. But then I started to think about how her mom not letting her dance wasn't so different from my sneaking around with the band, afraid Mom wouldn't let me do it if she knew. I understood wanting something badly and feeling disappointed, even if I didn't get why she would want to go from one stomping dance to another. It was kind of like how in The Outsiders, Ponyboy and Cherry Valance are from completely different worlds, but they understand each other, at least in some ways. I tried to convince myself that punks don't feel guilty about giving mean people a taste of their own medicine, but by the time we got home, I felt even crummier about my joke. Chapter 20. When the day of the talent show auditions arrived, I felt like we were as ready as we could be. We practiced every day, sometimes with Mrs. Hidalgo's help, and had watched a bunch of videos of the Ramones performing. I worked on my singing in the shower until Mom said she didn't know what she was going to do if she heard that song one more time. We knew we wouldn't sound perfect, but we'd have to really work on the song after we got into the talent show. Despite all our work, everything seemed to go wrong on that Thursday afternoon as we stood in front of Principal Rivera, Mr. Jackson, and Mrs. Larson, the music teacher. When we were setting up, Joe realized he'd left the cord to his guitar in his locker and had to run back to find it, which cut into the time we'd been given. Ellie counted us down, but all three of them managed to start playing their instruments at different times, so we had to start over. Worst of all, when it was time for me to sing, I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My tongue felt like it had been glued to the roof of my mouth, and as much as I tried, it wouldn't unstick. When it finally did, I sounded like I was croaking out the lyrics, at least the ones I could remember. But croaking seemed to work great with the grating, mismatched sounds that came from the instruments behind me. Halfway through the song, it felt like we were finally in sync. My face and ears burned. My stomach was still in a knot, and all I could do was clutch the microphone, but at least I wasn't croaking anymore. When we finished, Mr. Jackson and Mrs. Larson looked at each other, then at Principal Rivera, who jotted something down. Thank you for coming, Principal Rivera said with a smile. We'll post the participants on the announcements board tomorrow. We gathered our instruments, minus the drum set we'd borrowed from the band room, and left the auditorium. Outside there were a few kids, including Selena, waiting their turn. I thought that went okay, Joe said. You're kidding, right? I wanted to cry, partly from the relief of being done, but also because I knew we didn't sound anything like I imagined we would. Besides, Joe said, the auditions are just a formality. Everyone gets into the talent show. What's the point of auditioning then? Benny asked. They just make you audition to, pre-screen you, Joe said, to check that what you do is, appropriate. I felt a little better after hearing that, but before I went to sleep that night, I made sure my worry dolls were under my pillow. We just needed more time, and we'd be ready to rock the talent show. Chapter 21. The first thing I did when I got to school the next morning was check the announcements board where the talent show roster would be posted. I read name after name, scanning nervously for the Cocos, but we weren't on the list. What about what Joe had said? Didn't everyone get to perform? I knew we'd messed up, but I thought we'd get a chance to really prepare after the auditions. Except it looked like we wouldn't get that chance after all. Mr. Jackson's office was nearby, so I walked over, part of me hoping he wouldn't be there. His door was open a crack. I knocked before poking my head in. He sat at his desk eating oatmeal, the instant kind you mix with boiling water, and eat out of a cardboard cup. Hi, Mr. Jackson, I said, rubbing the toe of one shoe nervously over the other. I have a question about the talent show, and I thought I'd ask you since you were at the auditions yesterday. Come on in, Mr. Jackson spun around in his chair to face me. He had a little bit of oatmeal on his beard. Let me think. I know this. I waited for him to remember my name while he chewed on a spoonful of oatmeal. Maria Luisa, he finally said with a self-satisfied smile. Malou, I corrected. Yeah, so what's up, Malou? Well, do you know why my band didn't get picked for the show? I asked. Mr. Jackson swiveled back and forth. He cleared his throat and rubbed his hand over his beard, finally wiping off the oatmeal. Then he gave me an apologetic smile. Yeah, the Cocos, he said. Right on, you guys are pretty rockin'. So why aren't we on the list, I asked. Well, you probably know this year marks the school's 30th anniversary. We're celebrating Jose Guadalupe Posada, and Principal Rivera wants the talent show to have an anniversary vibe to it, he said. What does that mean? She wants to feature more traditional acts. Traditional how, I asked. Well, we've got some singers, a violin player, a kid who does these cool lasso tricks. Have you seen him? I shook my head. He's awesome, Mr. Jackson said, and one student is doing a folkloric dance, that kind of thing. Acts Posada might enjoy if he were alive. But there was nothing on the flyer that said we couldn't play any song in any way, I said. Was there? Mr. Jackson said, moving some papers around on his desk until he found the green flyer. He read over it, taking a bite of watery oatmeal. You're right. It says 30th anniversary, school appropriate, but nothing about specific types of acts. I even rewrote some of the lyrics to the song so that it would be okay for school, I said. You guys were fun to watch, Mr. Jackson said, but I think Principal Rivera wants it to be family-friendly. Maybe a little quieter than the Cocos. I'm sorry. He had a sincere look on his face, but that didn't make me feel any better. It's okay, I said. Thanks. I left Mr. Jackson to finish his oatmeal. As I headed to first period, my ears burned with anger at the unfairness of it all. I couldn't believe he'd been shut out of the talent show for being too loud. Ellie and Joe had already claimed a table when I walked into the library. We planned to meet at the end of lunch to talk about the talent show. Please don't get any food on that book, Joe, Mr. Baca called from the circulation desk. Got it, Mr. B, Joe said, trying to brush breadcrumbs off the pages of the book open in front of him so that Mr. Baca wouldn't see. Did you guys know that the Maya thought crossed eyes were attractive? He crossed his eyes and looked from me to Ellie with a straight face. What do you think? Were they right? Ellie laughed and shook her head. That does not feel good, Joe said, rubbing his eyes. Who am I to argue with the Maya? You are so weird, I said. Where's Benny? I'm coming, Benny said. As the door to the library closed behind him, he put down his trumpet case and bag next to our table. So what happened? Yeah, what did Mr. Jackson say? Ellie asked. She had a puzzled look on her face. Why weren't we picked? I shared with them what Mr. Jackson had told me that morning about Principal Rivera's plan for the fall Fiesta talent show. And it's totally unfair, I said, because none of that was in the flyer, right? But why would Principal Rivera do that? Ellie asked. Duh, Joe said, frowning, because she hates punk music. Principal Rivera just made up an excuse to keep us out, I said. How does she even know Posada wouldn't like punk music? Benny asked. How would any of us know that? I nodded. He had a point. You know what this is? Joe asked. This is discrimination, Ellie finished for him. That's right, Joe said, pounding the table with his fist. But what can we do, Benny asked. She's already decided we aren't playing in the talent show, which stinks because if I'd known this was going to happen, I would have just played with my band friends. They're in the show. We could start a petition, Ellie said. Demand to be included. I don't know, I said. That might work for some things, but I don't think it will work for this. Joe, Ellie, and Benny looked at each other. Excuse me, but did I just hear you quit punk rock a girl? Ellie asked. Her brow furrowed and she stared at me intently. Yeah, we put a lot of time into this, Joe added. Again, what are we going to do? Benny asked. I'll tell you what you're going to do right now. Mr. Baca came around the circulation desk and walked over. You're going to head to class. Lunch is almost over and I have a group coming in soon. Well, Ellie whispered as we left the library, what are we going to do, Malu? I had no idea, and I couldn't figure out what made me angrier. That Principal Rivera had basically discriminated against us because we played loud music that wasn't traditional enough, or that Selena made it and we didn't. That night, when I called Dad, the first thing he asked about was the talent show audition. It went really well, I said, and we're going to play too. I wasn't sure why I blurted out a lie, but I wanted to kick myself after the words came out of my mouth. That's fantastic. What did Mom say? Well, I haven't exactly told Mom about it. Lou, you have to tell her, Dad said. Of course, I said, I will. Soon, because if you don't, yeah, Dad, soon. Good, he said. I'm really glad you've made friends. Some of my best friends are people I've played music with. I thought about Joe and Benny and Ellie. I hadn't really thought about them as anything other than bandmates, but I guess they were friends, or at least the closest thing I had to friends. Although now that we weren't in a talent show, could we still hang out together? See, it's a good thing you had those worry dolls with you, right? Totally, Dad, I said. I guess they really work. When we hung up, I sat down at my desk to work on a zine. The Lola Beltran CD that Senora Aurelia had loaned me caught my eye, sitting on top of a stack of library books. I opened the plastic case and slipped the disc into my computer. The first song started all mournful, trumpets and violins. I lay back on my bed and wondered how many worries my little dolls could handle now that I had to add lying to Dad. When the CD finished playing, I searched online for videos of Lola performing. Her long, thin fingers covered in rings moved in dramatic gestures. Everything about her was big. Her hair, her jewelry, her voice. She was a pretty spectacular performer, just like the punk singers I loved. Just like I wanted to be too. If I ever got the chance. Chapter 22. Senora Aurelia's door was open a crack, and the smell of something delicious filled the hallway. Mom knocked, and we waited as footsteps shuffled towards the door. Vengan muchachas, she said, grabbing each of us by the arm. We've been waiting for you. She pulled us inside with a grip that was pretty strong for an old lady's. I made chilaquiles, she said. I think you're going to like them. I love chilaquiles, Mom said. Senora Aurelia had invited us to dinner Sunday with her family. Joe, Mrs. Hidalgo, and Mr. Hidalgo, who looked like an older Joe with a mustache, were in the kitchen when we arrived. We greeted everyone, and Mom placed the bowl of bean and corn salad that she'd made on the counter, which was already covered with enough food to feed more than 6 people. You want a pop? Joe asked, holding out 2 bottles of bright red Jarritos. Pop? I asked, taking one. Don't you mean soda? Maybe where you're from, dude. I took a swig of the soda that tasted like fizzy strawberry candy. I hope the chilaquiles aren't too picosos, Senora Aurelia said as we sat down to eat. I like them spicy. Mama, you know you're supposed to eat spicy food. Mama, you know you're not supposed to eat spicy food, Mrs. Hidalgo said. Look at this one talking to me like she's the mother, Senora Aurelia said and laughed. What's a little spice now and then, right? That's right, Bueli, Joe said, dishing up a spatula full of chilaquiles onto his plate. Don't encourage her, Joe, Mrs. Hidalgo warned. What about you, Malu? Do you like spicy food? I felt like I was in the hot seat. No pun intended. But before I could answer, Mom jumped in. I'm afraid Malu didn't inherit the Mexican taste buds. Everyone laughed except for me. Don't worry, Mr. Hidalgo said, rubbing his mustache. You aren't the only one who can't handle spicy food. I rolled my eyes at Mom and shoved a fork full of chilaquiles into my mouth to prove her wrong. Immediately regretting it, I could feel my tongue slowly begin to throb as the heat of the peppers crawled over it like an army of tiny fire ants. Toma leche. Drink milk, Senora Aurelia said, noticing my discomfort. Milk helps with the spiciness. gosh, we are out of time already. So I can't wait for a live reading next week. Seesaw responses, please, fourth grade. Thanks.